kingship would be through him. And so he couldn't take it completely away, but he could give him only a portion instead of the full blown area, the whole area, right? So that's where we start. Lesson 8 is the divided kingdom, and so we're looking at page number 91. If you want to turn in your books there, we're going to read some of this tonight, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it, and then we're going to get into the kings of each, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, Judah, and also a couple of the prophets. Despite his early success, Solomon, in the end, was a failure as God's king. Now we do see some glimmering hope that we think that he might have repented, because we do have the book of Ecclesiastes. You know, it never comes out and says that he fully repented. We see his shortcomings, but look, if you read Ecclesiastes, which obviously he wrote in his older age, you can look back and say, you know, he had a lot of regrets. He had a lot of hey, this is all vanity. Even though he made all this money, he had all this wealth, he had all the wisdom, he made poor choices, and it reflects in the book of Ecclesiastes. But in the end, he was a failure as God's king because of his promise of David. God did not remove Solomon's family from the throne. Instead, he divided the kingdom. If you look at 1 Kings 11, 26 through 40. Judah and Benjamin in the south became known as the nation of Judah. The remaining 10 tribes of the north became known as the nation of Israel, or the northern kingdom. How many kings? How many kings were there in total throughout the rest of the kingship through Israel and Judah? How many kings of Israel and the northern kingdom? How many kings of Judah were there? So we already had the 3 that was part of the United Kingdom, and then once it split, how many were in Israel and how many were in Judah?
Oh, it was 20 and 20, I thought.
Yeah. So Israel had 20, and Judah actually had 19 kings and 1 queen, and she didn't serve very long. But she actually had, and we'll talk about her in just a little while. So both of them had 20 monarchs. Israel, the northern, after the split, the northern tribe, or the northern northern Israel had 200 years of monarchs reigning before their fall. And then Judah lasted longer than them. They had about 350 years. Just like everything else we've talked about, where it's broken down into sections, you can see Mark Hines at the bottom of page 91 there. The division of the kings is broken up into different sections, because if you're reading, it gets confusing, because there's some overlapping of kings. There's king of Judah. There's king of the northern Israel. And there's also some sharing the throne going on with a couple of the kings, and it's really hard to decipher. Okay, who's king and who, because it's not in really spelled out extremely well. So Mark tries to do this with section 1, and he's talking about these sections here. 1 Kings 12 through 16, and then it's broken up 1 Kings 17 through 2 Kings 13, and then section 3 is 2 Kings 14 through 17, and section 4 is 2 Kings 18 through 25. So who takes the throne after Solomon? Which one of Solomon's, remember he had 1,700 wives and 300 concubines. So they're telling how many kids he had, but there was one that took the throne, and what was his name? Rehoboam. Okay, so Rehoboam, was he a good king or a bad king?
Bad king.
Bad king. bad king. Rehoboam was a bad king. He oppressed the people. Solomon was already kind of doing that, but he was also giving the people a lot of luxuries and great power and great wealth and all of that. But with that comes a lot of taxation, a lot of oppression, a lot of what did Samuel warn the Israelites about? When you get a king, what's going to happen? What did he warn them about?
He's going to oppress you.
He's going to oppress you. He's going to
Tax you.
Yep, tax you.
He'll take your sons and put them in the army.
Yep, take your daughters.
All your food's going to the king.
That's right. Your best livestock, your best. So we're seeing this. You know, did King David do that? No, we don't have a record of that. We have a record of Solomon starting to get like that, but Rehoboam took it to the very next. I mean, he took it crazy level. Not to be mixed up with Crazy Jerry yet. But Rehoboam was. So what happened when this Rehoboam now has the throne and he's taxing the people a lot harder? He's not only that, he's getting pleasure out of it. It's not even just, hey, we're going to tax everybody. He is like really getting pleasure out of oppressing the people. So what happens at this point? So the 10 tribes in the north, kind of like what we did here in America years ago, back in 1800s, had a rebellion against it, and they're just like we had a north and south problem going on. They've got a north and south problem going on. So the north, the 10 tribes up north, pulled away and rebelled against Rehoboam and his kingship. So I want to bring in Jeroboam, as Greg likes to call him, Crazy Jerry. So who is Jeroboam? Number one. Who was Jeroboam?
First king of Israel. I mean, the next king.
Okay. So, but who was he before that?
Solomon's general.
Yeah, he was Solomon's general, a right-hand man, military-wise, and what there was a prophet that prophesied that Jeroboam would rule over 10 tribes of Israel. Do y'all remember that? His name was Ahijah. And he prophesied that Jeroboam would, and this is back when Solomon was still alive. So Solomon knew that Rehoboam, his son, was going to be king, but yet Ahijah had prophesied that Jeroboam was going to be a king over 10 tribes. So Solomon actually tried to kill Jeroboam at one point, and Jeroboam fled to Egypt, because Solomon was trying to kill him. So, fast forward, Solomon dies, Rehoboam takes over the throne, Crazy Jerry comes back into town, and the northern people, pulls away from Rehoboam, and that's how the division started. So, they elected Jeroboam, Crazy Jerry, as king of the northern Israel. So here we have Rehoboam is down south and Jeroboam's up north. So why do we call Jeroboam Crazy Jerry?
He wasn't king very long where he decided, well, we're going to do things differently.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
We're not going to go to Jerusalem to worship. We're going to stay up here. And these golden calves will work, and you can do it on another day. And you don't even need to go to Jerusalem.
Right? Why did he do that?
He was afraid that the kingdom would be taken away from him if they reunited.
Yeah, so here we have the kingdom of Israel, the northern part, and we had the southern part, the kingdom of Judah. So where is the temple that Solomon built? It's
Pretty
in the
close.
south, right? It's in the south. Who's in the south? Rehoboam, right? So if Jeroboam is up in the northern part, he's afraid that whenever his people go down, his northern people that are supposed to be on his side, that he's governing, and they have to go down to Jerusalem to worship, that they're going to start siding with Rehoboam. So he's got this fear of losing power. He's got this fear of losing control and losing people to the people in the south. And so he was like, well, instead of them going down there and possibly getting either brainwashed or start getting on Rehoboam's side, we're going to go ahead and make, the worship places up here in Dan, and I think where was the other place? Greg, it was Dan and Bethel. And so anyways, that's one thing. So he's got this complex going on that he's going to lose control. So
Actually, Bethel's not too far from Jerusalem. I mean, they're in it's.
Is it just over the
it's a
border,
dividing
though?
line,
yeah.
But it's in the south, where Dan is way in the north.
Yeah, and so we'll see. Reading the scriptures, you can see after this division, there's a constant battle between the north and south. Sometimes it's a little bit peaceful, sometimes it's not, but there's always this division amongst them between the north and the south. And just like so what are a couple of the reasons between well, I'll just go ahead and say it. You have political reasons and you have religious reasons, right? Of these battles and these fightings and these wars that are going on between North and South here. Same as what we have today, right? You have Northern Ireland and regular Ireland. You have the North, wherever it's going to be political, it's going to be financial, or it's going to be religion. And sometimes all three of them wrapped up into it. And it's no different than right here. That's exactly what it was. What it was over: political and religious. And so, anyways, so that's where the split starts. Does anybody have anything up until now? You want to talk about Crazy Jerry anymore? Or you got anything else?
I mean, I would just like to read a little bit of it.
Okay. Yep.
In 1 Kings 12, starting in verse 25. Then Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim. It's important, well, it was something that I had to learn years ago, to pay close attention in Ezra, Nehemiah, and all the prophets. When God is talking, I had to pay attention because I always thought it was one and the same. Sometimes he's talking to northern Israel, and sometimes he's talking to Judah. Sometimes he's talking about, and he'll say Ephraim.
Right.
Who's Ephraim? That's the north. That's a nickname for them. And then sometimes he's talking about Judah. And so it's important to know that, to watch out for that. Who is God talking to at any given moment through the prophets? And that there is a split there. So we, like right off in verse 25, Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim. A lot of times Israel is called Ephraim. It's a nickname for northern Israel. And he went out from there and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now this kingdom will turn back to the house of David if this people go up to offer sacrifices in the temple of the Lord at Jerusalem. Then the heart of this people will turn again to their Lord. It is just plain evil the way he says it. The heart of the people will go where it should go. I can't let that happen. That's why I use such a term that's kind of a bold term, but he earns that title. He's just out of his mind. Now, it's like Saul, and he's not putting two and two together.
Right.
That God is real. What God wants with his people is real. how is it that you don't connect that you're fighting against God himself? So he's worried about their heart, returning to their Lord, and returned to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. Again, of all the things you could have done to have control over your people, calves, golden calves, really? With this history? And they're constantly bringing up the crossing of the Red Sea, crossing that, how God rescued them from the Egyptians, and all of that. They're like, we know the 4th of July, like we know the British are coming. They know the story of the golden calf. They know that story. Yet that's what he chooses, to draw the people away. And it's hard to sink your mind into that culture, how that even worked. But people can get to that point. He said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Behold, your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So that was a myth that had been carried along from back then. That idea of a golden calf being connected to Jehovah, Yahweh. He said, he set one in Bethel and the other he put in Dan. Then this thing became a sin, for the people went as far as Dan to be before one. He also made temples on high places and appointed priests from among all the people who were not of the Levites. Now, again, this is almost textbook as far as false religion. This is textbooks. Okay, well, we can't, I don't want them to go to Jerusalem, so we'll just say this land is holy or that land is holy. Why is it? Because I said so. Oh, okay. Well, we gotta have priests. Okay, you gotta have Levites to be. No, we're gonna use people that are not Levites. Why? Because I said so. That's religion. That's man-made religion. This is one of, if not the best, X's and O's, play-by-play of man-made religion. And then that man of God in the next chapter comes and tells him, look, you're not going to get away with this. It is so blatant, in your face to God move, and insulting with the golden calves and the fake priests and everything is just absolutely made up. But human beings can play pretend, and we do that to this day. Why is that sacred? Because I said so. Because I like that guy, and I like the Cadillac he drives, and I think he's cool, and he says it's okay, so I guess it is. That's what Jerry's doing. Jerry, and I only do that again also to help me remember Jerry and Ray. You know, Ray and Jerry, they're quite a bunch. You know, they're really, you know, I feel I think of them as cousins that one's trying to outdo the other.
Right.
And so Jerry is just absolutely, and he pulls it off.
Yeah.
And you read that as well. They said, what have we to do with the tribes of Judah, the sons of Jesse? What portion do we have with them? They had an identity they gave themselves, which again is part of our history, in that we are symbolically, when you're watching God speak about Judah or to Judah, symbolically that points to the church. Judah does. And northern Israel points to physical Israel. Obviously Judah ends up doing, according to God, far worse than Israel did before they got taken off into captivity. Judah gets just as ugly, but that split is symbolic. It points to, even today, the real Jew, the real Judah, is those who would follow like David did. They would have a heart, you know, after God's own heart, and they would understand the covenant that they have. Though they're failures, we are failures at being perfect as he is perfect. There's a difference between Judah and Israel. That's why you have Hezekiah, that's why you have Josiah. They have a heart like David did. Judah had a little glimmer of hope to be right. From the get-go, King Jerry has this make-believe. And it is echoed throughout the prophets. And if we don't pay attention, a lot of times we'll miss what's going on. When he says Israel this or Judah that, he's not talking to the same group. So I wanted to be sure to say that so everybody hears me, because for years I didn't catch on that that's two different countries, so to speak.
Right.
And two different reasons why they're in trouble. Two different reasons why they're being exposed to the wrath of God. And it all begins, for me it is, emotionally and in my mind, when Jerry just starts playing make-believe. As bad as Rehoboam is, at least he's not playing make-believe.
Right.
This is all made up. And the people just went along with it. It's amazing.
Which happens today, you know.
Right, sure.
With, like
It
what you
still
said,
happens.
you know, false religions and things like that.
Right.
I mean, look at verse 33, that same passage. Then he went up to the altar which he had made at Bethel, on the 15th day in the 8th month, even the month which he had devised in his own heart.
Right.
And he instituted a feast for the sons of Israel, and went up to the altar to burn incense. I mean, just like
Right.
you said, everything's made up, you know, devised in his own heart.
Yep.
It wasn't what God instructed. It wasn't what God directed. It wasn't anything like that.
He makes
So,
it look
yeah,
easy.
sure.
And it is easy. If
Yeah.
it's like what Paul told to Timothy, itching ears.
Yeah.
That,
Well, and I'm not saying we as in this congregation here, we could too, but we as a people today can fall into that same thing. You know, the further removed we are from understanding and knowing God's word, and we're just following, hey, that makes sense. Why do I have to go all the way down to Jerusalem?
right.
I can, that makes sense. I don't want to travel that far. They're on camels or on foot or on whatever.
Sure.
And, we'll just do it here. But that's not what God instructed. And with the golden calves, you would think that everybody knows the story, but, back in 1940 something, most everybody, I think, knew the Bible a lot better than we do nowadays. 50s got a little bit worse, 60s got a little bit worse, 70s got, the further removed we are, and we're just talking about decades here.
Right.
And you can ask people, I see these videos sometimes, people, this guy walking, hey, do you believe in Jesus Christ? I don't, they can ask him questions of the Bible, and they don't know simple Bible questions,
Right.
not just hard ones. And I would think 40, 50 years ago, you get a lot of answers,
Sure.
And so we're just talking about a few decades here. And so they might or might not, you would think that you would hope that they would know about the two calves. I mean, he even says in there about, he brings up about coming out of Egypt, brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Right.
And you would think that they told their sons and the grandsons and things like that. And but there might have been portions of them that didn't, so it's scary because, same thing with musical instruments or any other kind of thing that we might or might not do that is not authorized in the scriptures. And we've gotten so far away from that, even with denominations and things like that.
Let's add a little insult to injury now.
All right.
Go to chapter.
With Crazy
chapter
Jerry
11,
or?
Yeah,
All right.
Jerry.
What?
Chapter 11 of First Kings.
All right, so going backwards to
Yeah.
11.
He was actually selected by God.
Right.
Yeah.
And in verse 37, God said, I will take you and you shall reign over whatever you desire. You shall be king over Israel. Then it will be that if you listen to all that I command you and walk in my ways and do what is right in my sight by observing my statutes and my commandments as my servant David did, then I will be with you and build you an enduring house as I built for David, and I will give Israel to you.
That's right.
And then he goes off the cliff and makes believe.
Yep.
He had it made. He had it in his hand. God's on his side. All
Yeah,
he has to do is follow God.
Right.
So that just adds a little insult to the.
What verse were you reading, Randall?
Verse 37 to
Yeah.
39, 38.
Yeah, so this is, go back to verse 29, and that's when Ahijah comes into the picture and meets up with him and talks to him. So, and this is the part here where, go to verse 40, or 39, it says, "Thus I will afflict the descendants of David for this, but not always." And then it says, "Solomon sought therefore to put Jeroboam to death, but Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and he was in Egypt until the death of Solomon." So whenever he got told, "Hey, you're gonna be king over Israel," Solomon was like, "Wait a minute, that's supposed to be my son's throne, my family, not Jeroboam." But he just got told. So Solomon wanted to kill him. He sought to kill him, so he fled. And that's where, after Solomon died, Rehoboam got on the throne, and comes Jerry.
But he's been told by God, this will be your kingdom.
Right.
And yet he's worried people go to Jerusalem, they'll never come back.
Right.
God said it will,
Yep.
but you don't listen.
Nope.
And Solomon pulls a Saul.
Yeah.
He's thinking, oh, God said, well, I'll just kill you so
Right.
that God can't do that.
Right.
How do you not think that God, if he has to, he'll raise Jeroboam from the dead?
Yeah.
It doesn't, you can't stop
Right.
God.
Right.
Yet,
Well,
He's supposed to be the wisest man on the earth.
yeah.
he's not using it.
Well, and there's the thing, you can be wise and either make decisions from your emotions, or be wise and choose the wrong thing on purpose or by emotion and end up choosing the wrong thing. One of the, while I was studying for this, I read one article, let's call it, where it said that Rehoboam had the opportunity to do good and not have the nation split and have, but it's not, that wasn't God's plan, because he had already prophesied that it was going to be split. So he already knew what was going to happen and said, "Hey, here's what's going to happen." So Rehoboam, yes, he had free will to do that, but God already knew what the outcome was going to be. So were you about to say something else, Randall? Or? Okay. Anybody else have anything right now on Rehoboam and Jeroboam? So we have, here we just talked about Saul, David, and Solomon, and then the split, Rehoboam in the south and Jeroboam in the north. If you turn your page to 92, well, let's go back real quick. Out of all the kings, page 92. Out of all these kings that are listed here, we talked about there being 20 in the north and 20 monarchs in the south. That's 19 plus the one queen. How many are good? I remember, huh?
North or south?
Let's say north. How many are good?
0.
0. How about south?
You.
I remember as a kid in the back, we used to have the kings and their pictures along the walls in the classroom, going all the way around the room, and each king was listed with either a smiley face or a sad face, no matter, depending on if they were a good king or a bad king. And as a kid, I don't remember there being so many sad faces, really. I remember seeing the picture, but I think there's about 8 in Judah that are considered the good kings, and 0 in the north. So out of 40, let's call it 42, 43, let's call it 43 kings or king monarchs. That's Saul and David and Solomon, and then the 40. Got like 9 out of all of them. It just blew my mind. I knew that there was a lot of bad ones, but I never really thought about it until I was doing this study here. But I think there's about 8 is what we're looking at. Who was probably at the time the worst king ever in their history?
For which kingdom?
Let's say both of them.
Manasseh?
He was a bad dude, huh?
Manasseh?
Ahab.
I don't know, Manasseh was pretty bad.
Well, that
He
was-
repented,
That was later, right?
yeah.
So at the time of him being king, it said that he was the worst. He was the most evil king ever until that point. And, you know, like you said, you know, Manasseh came later. Ahab, number 8. Tell me some things about Ahab. What was evil about Ahab?
Jezebel.
Jezebel. He married Jezebel, right? What else?
He was whiny,
He was what? He was what?
whiny fool.
He was whiny. That made him evil, right? He was
Little
whiny.
kid,
Huh?
little kid on his bed, whiny.
Right. Yeah, he was whiny. He wanted the Naboth's vineyard, right? So what did he do?
He pouted.
Huh?
He pouted.
Pouted. And what happened after he pouted?
And Jezebel took care of it.
You know, his wife Jezebel wanted to know what he was so sad for, right? And had Naboth killed for his vineyard. And this is a king that he had all kinds of stuff. Do you remember what kind of house he had? You remember what kind of house he had?
Is that where you see built an ivory house?
Ivory house. Good job.
Yeah.
Answer's right there on the board, y'all. An ivory house. First Kings 22:39, it states, "Now the rest of the acts of Ahab and all that he did, and the ivory house which he built, and all the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Israel?" And this verse highlights Ahab's building projects, and they have actually found ivory in that area where they think that was probably his house, and it wasn't from, the ivory that they found wasn't local, so he had it brought in. But he had that shows his wealth and his power, showcasing his wealth and his reign. But yeah, he was a very evil man that set up worship places, false gods. Let me see. What prophet came during this time of Ahab being king?
Elijah?
Elijah. So we got a few more minutes. Let's talk about Elijah. So tell me, can you give me a couple of stories about Elijah? One in particular with Ahab.
Predicting no rain.
Do what?
No rain, wasn't it?
No rain. Yep. So he comes in 1 Kings chapter 17, declaring devastating drought, and as a consequence for Israel's idolatry, specifically their worship of these the false god Baal under King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. So during the drought, how did Elijah stay alive?
The widow?
Say it again.
The widow of
All right, the widow But God miraculously provides for Elijah by having ravens bring him food and water. Right? You remember that? And then when the brook that he was near, whenever the brook dried up, God sends him to the widow in Zarephath, whose supply of flour and oil never runs out. You know, she took him in, and her flour sustained her and her son and Elijah during the famine. So while staying with the widow, her son falls ill and he dies. And Elijah pleads with the Lord and stretches himself over the boy, and God brings the child back to life, restoring him to life. So that's a miracle that God did through Elijah. All right. One of Elijah's most famous stories is in 1 Kings 18. Do you remember what this one is?
That's the competition between the prophets.
Competition between who?
Prophets of Baal.
Okay. And this is going up against Ahab and Jezebel, right? And they're prophets of Baal. Elijah challenged them to meet on top of Mount Carmel for a contest. 450 prophets of Baal and Elijah. So tell me, what was the challenge? What was the competition?
Make a sacrifice.
Okay. Elijah proposes that both sides, the 450 and him, this is the agreement, that both would prepare a sacrifice, but don't light the fire. Prepare it, and then the God who answers by sending fire to consume the sacrifice will be proven as the one and true God. So the prophets of Baal spent hours calling out to their God, dancing and doing all these things, and come about noon, you know, nothing's happened yet. Later on in the day, Elijah actually starts taunting them, making fun of them. Turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 18. And by the way, they all said that was a good idea. The 450 agreed, and verse 20, starting verse 24, chapter 18, it says, "Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, and the God who answers by fire, he is God." And all the people said, "That's a good idea." Verse 25, "So Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one ox for yourselves and prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it." All right, we've already talked about that, so let's go down to verse 27. Now it came about noon that Elijah mocked them and said, when their fire hadn't been lit yet, you know, he said, "Call out with a loud voice, for he is a God," and maybe he's occupied, or maybe he's gone aside, or maybe he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and he needs to be awakened. So he's just taunting them, messing with them. So verse 28, "So they cried out with a loud voice, and then they cut themselves according to their custom with their swords and lances until the blood gushed on them. And when midday was past, they raved until the time of offering of the evening sacrifice, but there was no voice. No one answered, and no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, 'Come near to me.' So all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, 'Israel shall be your name.' So with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench around the altar large enough to hold 2 measures of seed. Then he arranged the wood and cut the ox in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, fill 4 pitchers with water and pour it onto the burnt offering and onto the wood. I don't know if you've ever tried to light wet wood. Yeah, nearly impossible. For us, nearly impossible. But after they poured those 4 pitchers of water on it, he says, do it a second time. So they did it a second time. And he said, do it a third time. They did it a third time. So now there was so much water on it, verse 35, the water flowed around the altar, and he also filled the trench with water. So it's not like they can do that. Maybe I got some gasoline or turpentine out here, I'm going to light it and it's going to go straight. No, there's a trench around it now with water in it. So the ox is wet, the stone's wet, the wood's wet, a trench around it with water in it like a moat. Elijah's prayer, verse 36, at the time of the offering and the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their heart back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. What a sight, you know. Time's about up. We're going to get into Elisha and the rest of lesson 8 on Sunday morning. I appreciate your comments and your attention tonight. Thank you.
All right, everyone, just a quick word before we go home. On this day in history, what's today, July 16th? 1945, everything changed. Other than somebody's birth who's very important to me. On this day was the first day that a nuclear bomb was tested in New Mexico. It was on this day. They had the Manhattan Project, super secret project where this unbelievably powerful bomb could be invented. It was a theory, and then there was a working together between extremely brilliant scientists, and for a while, and even to this day. I mean, that happened in 1945, and it's 2025, and obviously I am certainly not smart like they are, but there's a lot of things that were back then that now I can conceive in my mind, and how it's possible that that would work. There's a lot of things I can think of, but I still can't figure out how you split an atom. That just, I've heard it explained before, but that's amazing. However, they took it from theory to real world use. That same day, a ship left San Francisco with what we later would be known as Little Boy, the parts of the first atomic bomb. From that day forward, and especially the generations that were young near that time, it was a tremendous fear. The whole thing with, get under your desks in school if there's a bomb threat, if the Russians were going to bomb us or whatever. From that day forward, there was always this thought, what would we do if there was a nuclear attack? It's amazing to me that it's not happened yet. And I God forbid, times a million, time infinity, God forbid. Don't ever want to see that anywhere at any time. But it is amazing. Where else would I go? Who else would I thank that that's not happened? It could have happened several times since then. Hasn't happened. I got to thank God. I have to thank the Almighty God. Today, just like it's always been in this experiment, the United States of America, we argue with each other about the right way to do stuff. And it gets absolutely frustrating. And it gets to where, if you're not careful, it can steal your hope. Times infinity when you think about, what if somebody gets a hold of the right materials and they can explode one of those things somewhere? It can steal your peace. It can steal your joy. And I have no idea how people go about, other than the fact that they're medicating themselves with alcohol and drugs. I don't know how they get through their lives without absolute faith in God. I just don't get it. And for people to trust in their government is an amazing thing to me. It's been a couple of years since we studied Revelation, but I pointed out that in Revelation 13, where it talks about the beast, it talks about, I have argued, and still to this day argue, that the book of Revelation is symbolic of all of the books of the Bible leading up to the book of Revelation. And so in Revelation 13, it talks about the beast. It is beast-like to think about this world only and not the afterlife. That's what animals do. Even if you're one who trusts in your government to be your salvation. Which is why we have at the end of the book of Revelation chapter 13 verse 18, this calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and its number is 666. Now, if this preacher's right, that's got to be symbolic of something else in Scripture. And as I taught in our Bible class, it is blatantly obvious to me that it points to the time of Solomon. Because in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14, it says, the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. And when we did that study, we tried to calculate how much gold that is. It's just mind-blowing. And if your nation has that much gold, you would think, oh, we've got it made. And at that time, Solomon did. Israel did. They had rest from all their enemies. But it's a mistake, even if you were an Israelite, to trust and have your hope in government, even back then. Because as you know, we have the benefit of hindsight. We saw how it all just unraveled and was nothing but misery from then on. Yet the real child of God, throughout that time, there were people like Daniel, who in the midst of all of that corruption, was faithful to God and trusted God. Didn't worry them whatsoever. Doesn't matter. Okay, now Babylon's in charge. Okay, whatever. He wants to think he's king of the world. But I know who's the real king. My God is. You can't shake Daniel. You can't shake Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You cannot shake them because they do not trust in their government. Unless you're talking about the King of Kings. I don't know how anybody can get through this life without Yahweh. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. I can't do it. Years ago, when I started calculating the American dream, and as much as wonderful as it is to be at this time and in this country, it's amazing. We live like kings. It's so much better off than what other people, especially what we read in the Bible, what they had to go through, the way they had to live. Even now, there's no way I trust in America over my God. I have decided, and I decided long ago, to follow Jesus. Because it just doesn't make sense to follow any other person or any other system. And so I wanted to say that tonight before we went home, to absolutely, in a way of invitation, that anybody who would be hearing the sound of my voice to really analyze what do you trust? And if you trust in Jesus,